Let's cross live now to Lancaster House in central London, where the Prime Minister, Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and an awful lot of others, the great and the good, are arriving. And also Theo Usherwood, our political commentator, is also there to tell us what is going on with this, well, Surrender Summit. Theo, what has actually been agreed as far as we know?
As far as we know, there's a 12-year deal allowing EU boats from Spain, France, etc. to fish in UK territorial waters. In return, we're going to be able to export our foods and agriculture to the European Union without any checks, although we are going to have to follow EU rules, and the European Court of Justice in that area is going to have supremacy. We're also going to get access to a €150 billion defence fund. Of course, the British companies are going to be able to bid for contracts, which will, of course, the aim is at least to preserve European military power against Russia. There was a huge amount of consternation when a couple of months ago it was announced, the European Union announced that we were going to be excluded from that fund for military contracts from the British side, because of course they suddenly lumped in, well, you have to acquiesce on fishing rights. We didn't want to do that, but we've ended up doing it anyway.
Funny that.
Julia. So that's what we know already.
OK, so that's what we know already. And now there's a lot of fuss about this fishing deal because we knew that it was going to be reviewed. That Boris Johnson, when he signed the original deal, there was going to be a review after 5 years. But there's a lot of concern that we were still allowing access. I mean, EU fisheries all still allowed access, particularly French and Spanish boats. But French, this is a big sticking point for them into British waters currently anyway. But the idea was going to be gradually going down and down and down over the years, and that would allow the British fishing industry to build back up because of they have exclusive access to our fishing waters. That's kind of done and dusted. Now, Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, said if this is true, this is the end of the British fishing industry. I assume that Keir Starmer thinks, if that is the case, that that's a price worth paying.
Yes, it does. And Keir Starmer has made no bones about it. And it's worth remembering, of course, Daniel Zeichner, who was just to put it in comparison, when he went and addressed farmers, he said, the British farming industry was not a priority for this government. From Keir Starmer's point of view, it's the same thing again with the fishing industry. He's prioritising this defence contract. He thinks that highly skilled jobs can be preserved, indeed created, in companies for like the BAE System, Thales, where they can now have access to that fund to build missiles, drones, the latest technology which the Europeans can put together to put up a proper defence against Vladimir Putin post any peace settlement with Ukraine. And that's the direction of travel the government has decided to take. But there is a trade-off. And that's before we even get on, Julia, to the thorny issue of immigration.
Well, I just wanted to get onto that because...
of 27.
Yeah, but just want to say that's the thing, because the youth mobility scheme has been much in the news, and this idea that young people, but not free movement for everybody, but young people would be able to come and work here from the EU, and we'd be allowed to go and work in well, I say we, I'm 56. No, I'm 57 now, I wouldn't be allowed on that list. I would be allowed to go and work there.
I'm out as well.
That hasn't been finalised, but we haven't been told whether there's going to be a cap on the numbers, or a cap on the age, or a cap on the length of time. So we have no idea what this actually involves, do we?
No, you're quite right to say that, and we're not going to know that today, I don't think. We may get a couple of details, but the crucial detail that we're all waiting to hear from is, how long is that scheme? Does it mirror similar schemes that work for Australia, that work for New Zealand, 2-3 years? And of course, if that happens, Julia, then it's going to mean that those numbers coming from Spain, coming from France, coming from Eastern Europe as well, to this country in search of work, they're going to have to be included within the overall legal immigration figures. We've seen 2023 net migration 908,000, last year 728,000. The aim from this government, and of course what we saw announced last week with the immigration white paper, is to try and bring it down. But Reform have made the point, Julia, that this could see numbers actually spiralling up again, because suddenly young people who can't get work in countries like Italy or Spain or France are suddenly going to come here.
Yeah.
The Treasury are very for it. Rachel Reeves' department very for it because, of course, it feels a whole big business want to see this youth mobility scheme. But it will have a knock-on impact because, of course, we already have 1 million young people in this country who are out of training, out of work and out of employment. And this, of course, the argument will be from those who are very sceptical about it is that it will force down wages and make it less likely that we can get our young people off benefits and back into work.
Well, yeah, absolutely indeed. But don't worry, it's all going to be fine because of Egates. Now, again, this is one of these big lies that we're always being told that it's because of Brexit that we can't use Egates, and it's all down, it's not, well, we chose to leave, so you don't get to use Egates. I've always been of the view that's entirely up to the EU. I think that's a small price to pay. But if people want to make it harder for us to come to their country to spend money, that seems to me to be a foolish thing to do. We're not high risk. We've got more people coming from Europe to here who might pose a problem to us than the other way around. But we're told that we'll get more access to Egates. But the EU countries have already been allowed to give us access via Egates, and they will still get the final say. So that still won't solve the issue of people sometimes, on occasion, having to queue up longer while they watch people who have got EU passports just fly through.
Yes, Portugal already does it.
Yep.
You can fly to Portugal, you can access, as a British citizen, you can already access an e-gate with your passport. The Portuguese government obviously recognise that British tourists have and expats have huge amounts of money to spend in their country and welcome us by allowing us access to their e-gates. And we offer access to e-gates as well for European citizens where airports choose to do so. What Keir Starmer is trying to do, Julia, is to try and make, this is the gamble at least, is to try and, with this announcement, is to try and make this a consumer-facing announcement. It's worth remembering, of course, that EU countries will still be able to stick us in the queue,
exactly,
the long queue for non-EU residents, should they choose to do so. The other part of his gamble is that people no longer have time for worrying about the European Court of Justice or European Union supremacy over taking the rules when it comes to agricultural products being exported into the EU. But there is another downside to this that needs to be taken into account. We signed a heads of term agreement with Donald Trump when we last week, 2 weeks ago even, and of course what this will mean is that if we wanted to expand that deal to include food and agriculture, importing those products from the United States, it's now going to be very difficult to do so because we have to follow EU rules. And if there's a divergence, we have to ignore the US market, and we now have to agree with everything that European Union says, and it's regardless of any decision that they might decide whether they want to change the rules, we just go along with it.
Absolutely.
Because that's the agreement.
And again, those rules will be changed.
It's called dynamic alignment.
Yeah, those rules will be changed to benefit those countries, not necessarily our industry. I mean, again, as long as we're not required to eat horse meat. I mean, again, those wonderful EU rules, which meant that we're having horse meat in lasagnas from parts of Eastern Europe a few years back. Everyone remember that? That was all under those wonderful EU very high-level rules. But there we are.